Somewhat to our surprise, there was a call from the European Space Agency for an organisation to do a study on cultural utilisation of the International Space Station. So we thought we'd whack in a tender. We didn't really think they'd take us very seriously, but we got the contract. And so I spent most of, where are we now today? Most of 2005 looking at how the European Space Agency could develop a cultural policy within what started out as the International Space Station, and then we kind of broadened it and said, actually, this needs to be about the International Space Station program, including getting artists into the ground-based facilities and basically starting up a dialogue and a conversation about the cultural impact of space. And at the end, we made a report that proposed a number of initiatives, including a series of artist residencies, artists working with astronauts to kind of develop their missions in a way that would bring out the cultural aspects of what they were doing, as well as just technological and scientific experiments. This is one of the proposals by an artist called Tim Otto Roth to work with the phenomena of the light flash. Astronauts experience cosmic particles going through their eyes and they get a sudden light flash, and this was an idea to work closely with an astronaut and then manifest it on the Earth in some way as a flash timed exactly with the flash that he'd get, and then he'd press a joystick and we get a big flash somewhere, and we thought we'd do it on the top of the Eiffel Tower because that was where cosmic rays were discovered. And anyway, so should I talk more about ESA? Yeah, I'm just at the moment supposedly being issued with a new contract to start taking these ideas further and hopefully to start setting up some residencies within ESA and to do an exhibition of ideas for the broader European Space Agency community and gradually get this thing moving. It all takes a very long time. In the meantime, back on the Earth, we've had lots of fun doing art and flying projects. This is we've done 2 international artist air shows. This was a recent one, which is 2 weeks ago now. This is the Australian artist Ben Blakeborough with his flying platform. A piece by Ruth McLennan, obviously called Eagle, where we had an eagle flying above the audience, getting an eagle's eye view of what we were all doing. A pyrotechnics piece by Anne Bean, Nick Sales and Mark Anderson, which was the creation of a cloud. And so we had 2 lots of pyrotechnics go off, one at the top part of which created a beautiful black cloud that drifted off to join its colleagues in the sky, and the other was a waft of white mist over the park, which was appropriately called Gunpowder Park. And this is a really nice piece from our previous air show by the artist Simon Faithfull, who launched a chair to the edge of space. So we all know about the kind of high-tech way that Richard Branson's planning to get people into space. This is the economy version. And we set up a chair attached to a meteorological balloon, basically, and with a camera attached, and managed to track it all the way to the edge of space where the balloon burst, and you could see the blackness of space and the whole curve of the Earth. And we'd all rush, as soon as we launched it, everyone rushed inside of this giant screen in a workshop and watched this for about an hour and a half as it gradually got further and further away from the Earth. It was a very beautiful project and technically very accomplished. I have to say, the guy who tracked and managed to get the images, some kind of genius. To talk a bit about the future, we're developing a new program called Dark Places, which is a series of artist research projects, really looking at sites of science within the UK. As we've been very international, I wanted to come back and look locally, and I'm just fascinated by all these institutions that I go to that people don't even know they're there, like the Institute of Nanotechnology on a street corner, and a fusion reaction in the middle of the Oxfordshire countryside, and even local people don't really know what they are, and the only thing we get really is press releases. So it's about trying to take the lid off some of these places and look at their activity, their scientific activities, but also kind of look at their economic and cultural contexts of why they're there. So we're also linking up with a number of geographers who are interested in this area. So we have 5 research projects commissioned at the moment, one by Kip Kipriano, who's at the audience, and Simon Hollington. Another thing that's increasingly, as I mentioned earlier, is our work with artists who've been to the Arctic and Antarctica and the British Antarctic Survey. And so we did an exhibition with this artist, Simon Faithful, who'd been down. And the British Antarctic Survey just asked us to research and curate an exhibition around artists going to the poles, which I wouldn't usually do in isolation, but it also happens to link in with a series of symposia and talks and a publication that we're doing with the Open University and the British Library, looking at knowledges from the polar landscape, you know, how we form our knowledge of climate change from the information and knowledge that's brought back from the polar regions, which of course has largely been things like ice cores. Here's a nice picture of an ice core. But we think, and there's a particular younger generation of Antarctic researchers and geographers and sociologists who are very interested in the fact that a lot of artists have been to these areas now and are bringing back very different ways of looking at it and very different, you know, visual cultures of the regions, and are also working with local people, particularly in the Arctic. So for me, the British Antarctic Survey's request sort of fits in with this, so I'm thinking about this at the moment. Anyway, through this autumn we're going to have a series of talks and symposia bringing artists and scientists who've been in the Arctic and Antarctica together. And again, Yuri mentioned Marco Pelhan's iTask, which I think is absolutely key to this type of dialogue that we're trying to set up, what Marco is trying to do. This is an ongoing project with Brandon Ballinger, looking at deformed amphibians in the UK. Brandon is an artist who engages in primary biological research, and his particular expertise is deformed amphibians as a marker in species decline. I'm aware I've only got 5 more minutes, and there are a few other points that I wanted to make, so I'm going to whiz on a bit. Yeah, I think I'll talk a bit more about Brandon in a minute. So I think this session is called A New Form of Talking About Science. And I suppose the things that keep me going with this is my interest in opening up science, into bringing it out of the ivory tower, into making it something that all of us feel that we can engage with and have some contribution to the debate. Obviously, art has a very subtle way of opening up these dialogues, but I think artists are fantastic about being able to go into new arenas and not being daunted by them, and coming out with different perspectives and sharing those with a wider public.